Don't provoke the secrets hidden within my family home. During the 2007s, our family of four, me, my little brother, mom, and dad moved to a new house. It was not the best phase of our lives at that time. We had to sell our first house and had to move to a cheaper area. The new house that my father had rented was owned by that town's very well-known ex-attorney, who was also an old friend to my grandfather. No wonder he rented us the house for such a cheaper price. The attorney had 3 children. The eldest daughter, who was married with 2 kids, a son who was a medical student, and the youngest daughter who sadly passed away from a fire accident a few years back. The first 2 siblings stay out of the town. My dad was an alcoholic, abusive to my mom, and emotionally absent. My mother was emotionally unstable, bipolar, had serious anger issues, and often suffered from severe depression because of my dad and his unfaithful behavior. During that time, my grandma, father's mom, got sick with lung cancer and started staying with us. Needless to say that the environment at our home became very gloomy and depressing. She and I took the 2 rooms downstairs. Upstairs had 1 more room where my mom and dad stayed with my little brother. A few weeks later, I discovered something very shocking about the house from school rumors. My classmates would tell me that the youngest daughter of that attorney had committed suicide by setting herself on fire, and that it was not an accident. At first, I didn't believe them, but everyone I had asked, starting from my older cousins to my aunt, they all said the same thing, but warned me to never speak about it in front of the owners, because that's how they wanted to keep it. The most disturbing thing was when I found out that my room was her room, and she killed herself in my room. My childlike brain was very disturbed by the knowledge. But it was apparently very amusing to my classmates, and they kept asking me if I felt anything paranormal inside the house, but it never felt haunted ever, not until 6 months. Odd things started to happen. My room was next to the kitchen, separated by a wooden door which had a crack, and light could pass through it. One night, I woke up to a sound of someone chewing in the kitchen, but fell asleep again in a minute or two, thinking someone might be having a midnight snack. The next morning before breakfast, my mom started to complain that the eggs were missing. This happened a couple of more times, that food items such as eggs, 3 fishes from the curry, pieces of fried chicken started going missing. I heard my mom complaining to my aunt on the phone that my grandma was going crazy, and she is eating up all the food at night because she was on a diet restriction during the day. I confronted my grandma, but she always changed the topic. I disliked the fact that she is stressing out my mom, knowing she is already suffering emotionally because her abusive son. Moreover, since her cancer treatment started to become more expensive, my father had to cut off my little brother's baby formulas and bought the cheap ones which my brother hated, and also stopped my mother's medications. One night, I decided to stay awake to catch her red-handed. I tried my best to not fall asleep, but unfortunately I did around 1:30 a.m. I frantically woke up half an hour later and remembered what I had planned. But tonight, I didn't hear anything from the kitchen. In fact, I have not heard the chewing sound except once. Maybe she became a little too cautious of getting caught now. I tried to peek outside from the crack of my bedroom door, although I could barely see anything because everything was dark until the light from the open fridge made it clear. Someone had opened the fridge. My grandmother had very short hair and almost balding from all the chemotherapy she has been taking. But the thing I saw was full of hair in its head. The fridge was wide open, and a woman with frizzy and open hair, seemingly naked, was sitting like a frog in front of the fridge and staring still at it. I couldn't see the face because it was back facing my door. I froze for a minute and felt like my heart was gonna stop. I somehow mastered the courage to go back to my bed because there was no way of getting out of the room as I had to pass through the kitchen. I don't know for how long I sat still on my bed. After a while, I started hearing the birds chirping outside and the sun was rising. I heard the front doorbell ring and it was my dad, and he was drunk as usual. I checked the clock. It was 4:45 a.m. I went to school that morning, and the first thing I did was I told my classmates that I finally saw it. Their eyes and mouth were wide open, and I could see goosebumps on their hands. I enjoyed the attention at school that day, but I didn't have the courage to tell this to my dying grandma and overworked, depressed mom. A month had passed, and I hadn't experienced anything except weird sounds of someone hopping on the floor, loud breathing from unknown source, but those used to last hardly few minutes. I started getting used to it and almost forgot about it, as I was getting quite busy with schoolwork and activities. My grandma was getting sicker, but my mother couldn't stand her. Teep, she hated my dad's side of the family. I was getting kind of annoyed with my mother and her frequent bickering against my grandma. My dad started becoming even more absent. He just threw money at us and left the house every now and then and won't show up for a day or two. My mother was getting unstable each day, and her anger issues started getting severe. She would stomp all over the house, slam doors and utensils all over. It was getting very uncomfortable staying with her, and I didn't feel safe. I tried speaking to my aunt, and she said she would visit us soon and start her medications again. Until then, I should keep an eye on my small brother. All these things made me forget about the paranormal activities at the house. That night, I fell asleep very quickly after a long day at school. I was woken up yet again in the middle of the night by something falling on the kitchen floor like a spoon or a knife. I felt the same nervousness as the first day, but I didn't see anyone in the kitchen as I peeked through my door. I was too sleepy to be bothered, so I came back to my bed and fell asleep again. The peace of sleep didn't last long. I woke up again with a feeling that someone was right at the door. I went to peek again, but no one was there, until something inside my head told me to peek down through the crack of the door. There it was, the same figure. frizzy open hair, sitting like a frog, seemingly naked. But this time it was not sitting in front of the fridge. It was very close to my bedroom door and back facing it. I tried to scream at the top of my lungs, but it felt like I had lost my vocal cords. The scream finally came out after a few seconds. My grandma came running to the door asking me what happened. I could see that she could barely walk now, and she was all skin and bones like she is up from death. I explained her everything. She stared at me quite oddly. My mom came running from upstairs and I told her everything too. She offered me to sleep with her that night and said I was probably having a sleep paralysis and that it happens to us sometimes when the body is tired. I understood she inclined towards my long day at school, which made sense. After that incident, I again did not see or experience anything terrifying for many days, and my grandma passed away within the next 2 weeks. What unsettles me to this date, when I was giving her company before her last day at the hospital, she didn't speak to me at all, so I decided to go back home and take some rest. "Grandma, I am going home for a few hours. I will be back in the evening. Don't worry," I whispered at her ears. "It was her," she whispered back in her dying voice. "Huh?" I asked, totally clueless. "Don't make your mother angry," my grandmother's last words.